Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's expert webinar titled Identity Management. I am Abhishek from Spring People. We are India's largest enterprise training provider. I will be your moderator for today's session. In today's session, we have Mrs. Sonal Sarda, who is a certified leader in corporate training, boasting over 25 plus successful years of experience, specializing in result-oriented skill development. As an industry expert in niche technologies such as AWS, Azure, Red Hat, Linux, and IBM AIX, Sonal has conducted over 800 trainings globally for both B2B and B2C clients, earning excellent feedback. With hands-on experience in AWS and Azure core services, Sonal has assisted businesses in making informed choices for cloud computing platforms, emphasizing cost optimization and security assessment. Mrs. Sonal Sardar's skill set extends to AWS Essentials, AWS Cloud Practitioner, AWS Solution Architect, AWS System Operation Associate, AWS Developer Associate, Microsoft Azure Architect Technologies AZ303, and GCP Solution Architect. Sonal is an adaptable consultant tailoring training methods to diverse skill levels from millennials to industry veterans. Additionally, Sonal has implemented 75 plus projects for AWS, reviewed by Amazon technical managers, and developed comprehensive content on various services. Today, Mrs. Sonal Sarda will let us know about importance of identity management using AWS, IAM service, IAM policy types, what are least privilege permissions, IAM use case. To all the participants, you can mention your questions in the chat box and it will be answered at the end of the session. Without further ado, let's start today's session. Now, I would like to invite Sonal Sarda to start the session. Over to you, Sonal.
Thank you so much, Abhishek. Thanks for the wonderful introduction. And I would say it is very much aligned with today's webinar topic. Thanks for defining the who part of me, because today's webinar is all about understanding, defining, and managing the who part in AWS Cloud. So I'm going to discuss today who can do what on AWS Cloud and what service can we use to perform this activity. So I welcome you all for joining me today. Thanks for investing your valuable time. I hope to add more value to your time and provide you good experience. As Abhishek has already highlighted the agenda for today, so before we wrap up today's webinar, I would like to showcase some interesting demonstration on IAM service. Now, it is very important to understand why we are discussing what we are discussing. Before we start understanding or discussing any technology, why we are discussing what we are discussing. So before discussing on identity management, let us understand the importance of identity management. And before identity management, I would like to highlight few points on identity, the importance of identity. Okay, so first let us understand the importance of identity. Okay, now there are many questions around identity. The first important question, the most important question is, who am I? What is my true identity? What do I do? Where do I belong to? What is my professional identity? What is my personal identity? How many identities do I have? So all these are important questions that revolve around the word identity in our physical world for our personal identity. So it's an important part of our life. It is basically a symbol of our existence in this world, in the physical world. Now, how about a digital world? The who part also plays an important part in the digital world. Who am I needs to be defined in digital world, needs to be protected, needs to be safeguarded. Now, for example, we all have an identity. We created our identity on different social media platforms. For example, LinkedIn, WhatsApp, Instagram, Facebook. We all have an identity, right? So this is our digital identity. Managing identities is very important and critical in digital world, because with the help of which, if we able to manage it, safeguard it, we can safeguard our resources, we can safeguard our digital assets and resources. So basically, it is the first step of security domain. Identity management is the first step of security domain. The best example I can give you, protecting our net banking credentials. There are various layers of security management, and identity management is one of them. It comes under perimeter security. Identity management comes under perimeter security. Now, what does it mean? The primary goal of perimeter security is to prevent unauthorized access, is to monitor login logout activities, is to control the authorization, is to provide the least privilege. So basically all this comes under access management. The perimeter security, the first thing is access management. I would like to add an example over here. Let's say you want to board a flight. Let's say you have a flight to Delhi at 6 p.m. You go to airport. Now, do you have a direct access to the flight? Can you board the flight directly? There are multiple layers of security that we need to cross before we can actually board the flight, isn't it? The first layer is at the main gate. How can we cross that? We have to showcase our identity. Once that is authenticated, then we get inside the airport. Next step is getting the boarding pass. There also we need to show our identity. They cannot just issue the boarding pass to, if you just say the name, right? You have to show that you are the same person who has booked the flight. Once you get the boarding pass, to go to the security check-in, you will have to again show your boarding pass, which is an identity provided to you by the airport authority. And even to board a flight, you have to show your boarding pass. So basically, you're carrying your identity, crossing multiple layers of security before you can board a flight. Likewise, in digital world, there are multiple layers of security. We add multiple layers of security to protect our assets. So the first one is perimeter security. Now, based on this example, suppose on the similar line, if I want to manage the who part in AWS cloud, who part in AWS cloud, I need to take help of a service. Okay, so let me just highlight the service name. The service name is Identity Access Management, IAM. To define the who am I in AWS, or to manage the identity and access to the identities, IAM service is used. IAM service has lot of features. As we all know that AWS is a market leader as a cloud service provider with more than 200 services in its offering under different categories. So under security category, there is a service known as IAM. There are many more services under this category. So now, if I want to start using this service, identity access management, what do I need to do? I need to create an identity with AWS. I cannot just start using any service. I have to create an identity. And what is that identity? That is going to be my first identity with AWS. So by using my mail ID, to create an account, we have to provide mail ID and other personal details. Once it is created, that mail ID becomes my identity to access AWS services. So once I log on by that identity, what access will I get? I get the root access. Now, what is a root access? A root is an administrator. Root can do anything and everything. So whatever services are offered by AWS can be accessed, can be deployed, can be implemented by root account. Now, first, the important question is, how do I safeguard my root account? Right? That is one important point. Second important thing, am I supposed to do everything by using root? Let's say I want to deploy a virtual machine. I want to create a backup. I want to manage the storage. I want to create a CI/CD pipeline. I want to deploy a container. So does a single person perform all this activity? Am I supposed to log on as root? Should I supposed to log on as root and perform all this activity? No. What should we do? Instead of root doing everything, let's delegate the rights. We are supposed to delegate the rights. Let's say one person working as a backup administrator, the other person managing the storage, the other person managing the instances, the other person managing the containers. So we can delegate rights, and the advantage of delegating right is that you provide only the permission required to perform that activity, what we call it as principle of least privilege. You should always give what is required. If you are over permissive, taking out the permission from any employee, from any person, will not create a good impression. Be restrictive, and then as when required, you can always add additional permission. Now, coming to the point wherein managing identities. So now how do I create identities? Instead of just logging in as root and performing all the activity, now we understood that we need to create additional identities. And how do we do that? By using AWS IAM service. Let's say I created an additional identity by the name backup admin. Okay, backup admin. Now, how do I give rights to this admin? That is first question. So this backup admin, what it represents? Backup admin is the who part. And what that person can do, what that user can do is the what part. Who can do what? So there are two things, authentication and authorization. Authentication defines the who part, which we call it as principal. And authorization defines the what part, what that person can do, what that user can do. Who can do what? And how do we provide authorization? By using policies. So there are lot of built-in policies provided by AWS. So let us see what policies do we have. There are different types of policy we have. I am just highlighting two types over here because of time constraint, but there are many more different types are there, and there lot of discussion is there, lot of like there is a guardrail policies are there. We have granting and we have guardrail different under different categories does it come. Now, under policy type, Identity-based policy. This is attached to an identity. Identity can be a user, it can be a group, it can be a role. So it is basically attached to a identity. And resource-based policy is attached to a resource. Example, let's say I have an S3 bucket. We have a service in AWS, the storage service known as S3. So I have an S3 bucket. So the resource-based policy is created at bucket. Identity-based policies are attached to identity. So basically policies follow PARC model. PARC. Principle, action, resource, and condition. Principle, action, resource, and condition. Now let me provide you what does it mean? Principle. Principle defines the who part. Action defines what part. Resource defines which part. So this is who, what, this one is which, and this is basically how. So policy uses this model: principle, action, resource, and condition. Policies are defined in JSON language, JavaScript object notation. So these are the 4 elements that comes in policy: who, what, which, how. Who is the principal? What is the action? On which service? What level of access to be given? That is action. Which is nothing but a resource. For which resource the permission is applicable. And condition, you can add condition to your policy. If the condition is satisfied, policy is applicable, else it will not be. So these are the 4 elements of your policy. Now there are lot of standard policies or AWS managed policies we have. We can just go ahead with the AWS managed policy attached to principal, and the principal or the who part will be able to perform the activity. Else we can create our own custom policy. If you have some specific requirement, and suppose you don't find a AWS managed policy, you can define your own policy as per your requirement, and that will give a fine-grained access to the user instead of using AWS policy. This is apply fine-grained permission. You can apply this to your policy, to your principle, and that will help you to follow the principle of least privilege. Again, it has to be written in JSON. Now, important point to be noted here is that in the PARC model, this PARC model will be there, means the P from the PARC comes only for a resource-based policy. For identity-based policy, you do not have to define a principle. Principle doesn't come because we are defining a policy and we are attaching it to the principle. But here, we define a policy at a resource to provide access to certain principle, to certain user. Okay, so PARC comes for resource-based policy, ARC comes for identity-based policy, action, resource, and condition. Now let me take you to the AWS Management Console to show you how the policy looks like and how can we attach the policy to the user. Now here I am in the AWS Management Console. I go to IAM service, which is Identity Access Management, and let's create a user. On the left side, we have menu. So from the left side, I'm selecting a menu under which I have a user option. I go ahead and create user, providing user name as, let's say, S3 admin. What type of access to be given? I provide console access. As I go down, I want to create this as an IAM user. Now I just want to highlight few points over here. An IAM user is a local user for this root account or for this account. It's a native user. I logged on by my account. Okay, so this is my root account. From root account, I'm creating an IAM user. We can also use external identities, single sign on. So for that, we have this option of identity center. But presently, I would want to create an IAM user. Either we can auto generate the password or we can provide custom password. Let me provide custom password here. Now, how do I want to provide permission to the user? There are different options given. Either I can add the user to a group or we can copy the permission from an existing user if I want to create with the same permission, or I can attach policy directly. Now let me highlight attach policy directly, and if I scroll down, look at the number of policies being provided by AWS. So it is more than 1100 policies we have right now for providing access to different AWS services. So these are AWS managed policies. Policy name, and you can see the type as AWS manage. So I can go ahead and attach the policy to the user. Each policy has authorization, the permissions attached to it. I can attach single policy, I can attach multiple policies to a single user. Currently, I'm doing one thing, I will not attach any policy to a user. Let me just get to next, create user. Okay, I just provided the name, password, and I'm creating the user. Return to user list, the user is created by the name S3 admin. Now let me log on by this user. To log on by this user, you have to get a sign in link. You can just go to sign in link, which is provided under security credential. Copy this link, open in another browser, paste it. So in place of account ID, some name is coming over here. So as you create an account with AWS, you will get a unique 12-digit account ID. I have aliased it, so the alias name is highlighted here. So under that root account, this IAM user is created. Okay, so let me log on. Okay, so now this, if I just do a pull down here, you can see account ID and the IAM username. So the account got created. Now let me see what I can do here. Let me try to list the users which I created under IAM service. So let's go to IAM dashboard. Can you see, guys, it's giving me access denied, right? So I cannot list the users. Let me go to S3 service and let's see if I can list the storage. Okay, so you can see here, let me go to the buckets to get a list of the bucket, and here also I'm getting an error, you don't have permission to list bucket. So basically what we can understand from this is that there is no default permission. I can just log on, I can see the services offered by AWS under various categories, and I can just go to the dashboard, that's it. But I cannot list any resource, I cannot access any resource. I would need a permission to access everything. So default is denied, everything denied. Fine, let's go back to the root account. Let us attach certain permission to this user. So the first tab is permission tab. I go to add permission, attach policy directly. Now I would like to attach the policy S3. So I can just filter it out S3, let's say full access. The policy name is S3 full access. I go to next, add permission. That's it. I'm done. Attached one policy. The policy is to access S3 service. Let me go back to my user and let's check if user can access S3. Searching for S3. Now can you see, guys, I have my I can list the buckets. Now, since I have given full access, I will be able to perform the other action, the other activity. So once you attach any policy, once you detach any policy, immediately it will take into effect. You do not have to log off and log on by the user. Okay. Now coming back to the main root account. Let me show you this policy. Let's see how the policy looks like. Now this is a identity based policy. If you look at this policy, there are multiple statements are there, or multiple what we can say the keywords are there under statement block. You can see the effect is allow. So basically effect takes two value, allow and deny. If you want to create a permissive policy, you have to put the word allow. If you want to create the restrictive, you have to use deny one. Now under action as I mentioned earlier defines the what part, means what access to be given. So the service name, for which service you want to provide access, colon, and then you provide the access level. Now in this star is given because I have selected ST full access. So star means full. If I want, I can just choose what access I want to provide, what type of access I want to provide. And then we have in the park model, R is the resource, right? So resource is to which resource? Now S3 is a collection of buckets. Let's say I have 50 buckets in my account. Do I want to give access of all 50 buckets? If yes, provide star here. If no, provide the bucket ARN, Amazon resource name. So you can create a more restrictive policy. This is a AWS managed policy. We cannot modify this, but we can always create our own policy. Now in this identity based policy, you do not have the first letter, that is P. Principal is not there. But if you define resource based policy, the principal has to be defined over there. Since there is no principal attached to this, we can attach this policy to any identity. Now suppose I go to the policies here, and here we have so many AWS managed policies are provided. Now if I do a filter, customer manage. So these are the policies which I have created. Or if I go to AWS manage job function. So there are many policies under AWS manage job function. Now what are these policies? If you look at the name of the policy, you will understand that. See, if you see security audit or system administrator or data scientist or network administrator, basically these policies are defined for a particular role. If you're novice to AWS and you would want to create a user, or you want to create an account for one of the employee in your organization who is working as a database administrator, you create an account and just attach this policy database administrator. It will provide all the rights required for the database administrator role. So likewise, there are multiple such policies which are defined for a particular job function managed by AWS. Then you have got AWS managed policies. Now I will go to customer managed policy. Now look at the difference. You will not find any icon which you can see against the AWS manage. Let me create one policy. So let's go to policies and create a policy. As I mentioned earlier, it is written in JSON. So if you are comfortable with JSON, you can just go ahead and write the policy in JSON. Else, what you can do, you can use a visual editor. So here option JSON is been provided, or you can go to visual, wherein you can just select from the list. Now let me select, let's say I want to define a policy for S3 service. Now actions allowed. If you want to give all the permission, you can just select this box and that will be like S3 colon star. But I don't want to give all the permission. So I can individually select from this list access level. Now, if you see a different level of list permissions, we have total 15 different list permission, 60 different read, 56 different write permissions. So you can make out you have so much of you granular control. You can create the list, you can follow the list privilege principle by creating your own custom policy. You can just select what you want from each of the access for each of the service and under service for each of the access level. You don't have to give everything access to everything. So I'm just randomly selecting here, and you can see you can also choose a resource. For which resource do you want to provide? Do you want to give it for all the resources for that service, or do you want to make it specific to a resource? So it is always recommended in the broad environment, you should always create your own custom policy. Do not go ahead with AWS managed policies. And there are many more things under custom policy. It is not just what I'm discussing here, but there are many options for this. Apart from the access level, apart from the resources, you also have a conditions. You can add condition to your policy. And that becomes like a if then. If the condition is satisfied, then this policy works. If the policy is attached to the user and the condition is satisfied, it allows the user to access the service. If the condition is not satisfied, it doesn't allow the user to. Not just these two condition keys are there, but if I click on add another condition, you can see there are many more condition keys are there under global condition key as well as under service level condition key. Each service has got different condition keys. Global condition keys are applicable for all the services, and service level condition keys are available only for that service, applicable only for a particular service. So we discuss all these condition keys, or how we can use or how can we create a conditional based policy in our course, the Solution Architect Associate course. But here, just one example I would like to add. Let's say I want to provide access to my S3 bucket, the one where I store my data. I have uploaded some important document in S3 bucket, and I want to provide access to the user only for 10 minutes. This is one example. Another example, let's say I would want to provide access to user for only a single region. Now there are so many regions. If I just do a pull down, there are multiple regions where AWS has deployed its data center. I would want to restrict the user only to, let's say, Mumbai region or only to North Virginia region. I can do that by adding condition to my policy. I want to provide access to the user to AWS service, or let's say for a particular service only for 1 hour. Let's say morning 9 to 10, only for 1 hour the user should be able to access EC2 service or ST service. I can create such policies. So there are many such examples which use cases are there where we use the conditions, and that will allow us to provide the list privilege, a granular control on the user authorization we can have by creating our own custom policy. Now, basically this identity access management service, IAM service, there are 4 entities that comes under this service: user, group, roles, and policy. On the left side, the menu is there: user, group, roles, and policies. When I want to give similar rights to multiple users, I just put the user in a group. Multiple users I put in a group, and then I work at a group level. I detach the policy at a group level. Now I just have one question over here. What do you think? How to protect a user? How to protect, how to safeguard a root account? Root account is so important that once we log on, we have access to everything, right? So it is very important that we should protect or safeguard our root account. So what are the different options being provided by AWS to safeguard the root account? So just think over this question. We will discuss on this question at the end of webinar. Another important point which I would want to highlight here is the password policies. We can go to account settings and we can set the password policies. And this will be applicable for all the IAM users. If you want to have a strong password, it will be applicable to IAM users. If at all you want to provide access to some other user, the user who is not an IAM user of this account, you are managing multiple AWS account and you want to share some data from one AWS account to another AWS account. How do you provide the access? That we call it as cross account resource sharing. Cross account resource sharing. And here you take help of a rule. So there are multiple use cases of rule. Account 1 from account 1 to account 2. Sharing certain resources. So account 2 will have to assume a role to access the resources from account 1. And account 1 will have to create a role. And how do we attach permission to a role? Again, same thing, we attach a policy. So basically policies play a very important role. Having a better understanding of policy, like what the policies are, how it is been written, what different policies are provided by AWS, and how can we create our own policy. Because we attach policy to user, we attach policy to group, we attach policy to role. We also have got inline policy. Now, if I go to the user and if I try to attach, let's say I want to add one more policy. So I can either go ahead for AWS managed policy or I can create an inline policy. This policy is only created for this entity, for this user. It is kind of a resource-based policy. It is attached to this. Just like in an organization, exceptional rights are provided to one of the employee. Even though other employees are working under the same designation, but it is not applicable to the other employee. So certain exceptions are there for a particular employee. Similarly here, we want to provide certain rights, but only for a user. So we are creating an inline policy which will be inline for the user. It will not be possible to attach inline policy to multiple principal. It just created for one principal. You can create it in the same way how we create any customer managed policy. So these are the different types of policy: AWS managed policy, customer managed policy, under which like all these AWS managed policies and customer managed policy falls under identity based policies. These are attached to identities. Inline policy is also attached to identity. We can have inline policy for a group as well. We can have inline policy for a role as well. We attach to the identity, and resource based policy for a resource. Now if I take you to the S3 service to show you about a resource based policy. Now here I have got multiple buckets. I just choose one of the bucket and I go to the permission tab. Now as I scroll down, this bucket policy, as you can see here, written in JSON. So here I can define a policy just like how we create an IAM policy. But here we need to define the principal to whom we want to provide a right. So I go to edit and I just define the policy. If you are not comfortable with JSON, you can go ahead and use the policy generator. Generate the policy and then finally copy and paste it over here. look at the bucket ARN, which I was talking about. So if you want to add the ARN in your identity-based policy, to make it specific for a particular user, to make it specific for a particular resource, you can just copy the bucket ARN, or you can copy the ARN of any other entity, any other resource. Now, if I go back, now I'm back to my IAM, and here, if I select a user which we created just now, you can see a user has got an ARN. So basically, every resource that you create in AWS has got ARN, Amazon resource name. A group also has an ARN, bucket also has an ARN, everything has an ARN, which will be useful for attaching certain rights to that resource, or providing rights for a particular resource. So this is again ARN. Now many questions are there that I would like to raise over here. One is, how do we protect the root account? Second one is, how many policy can we attach to a user? And the third question, the most important question is, what if there is a conflict in the policy attached to a user? For example, a user, let's say I have a user to which S3 allow is there and S3 deny is there. Both the policies are attached. Which is applicable to the user? The contradictory policies are attached to user. Which will take precedence? Now, next important point which I would want to highlight here is, what is the scope of this IAM policy, or what is the scope of IAM rule? It is not just only at a user level, but it is also at a service level. If one service wants to communicate with another service in AWS cloud, we have to take help of a rule. The service will have to assume a role to access other service. So when I go ahead to create a role, I will have to create a trusted entity. And I will have to, for which service do I want to create a trusted entity? I need to choose that. Suppose I want EC2 instance, which is a virtual machine, should be able to access the S3 service. I will have to create a role for that. EC2 will have to assume a role to access the S3 service. So when we create a role, let's say I'm creating a role. Let's say I choose EC2 over here. The trusted entity, I'm selecting EC2, and then I go for next. Now it's again asking me to add permission, and that too selecting the policy. So policy also provides rights to access the services, inter-service communication. Now I choose S3. Let's say I'm selecting S3 read-only policy, and I create the role. Let's say EC2 to S3 demo, and I go ahead for create. Now my EC2 instance can assume this role to access the S3 service. So this is also, now who becomes the principal? Who is the principal in this example? EC2 to S3. Who is the principal? So here a trust relationship got created between EC2 and S3 service. And it is using assume rule. So policies basically has a broader prospect. It is used across the services. It is used to provide access for an external users. For external users also we need to create role, and external users assume the role to access AWS services. It provides rights to internal users, that is IAM users. It provides rights to the resources. So this falls under security domain, and we use this service to secure our root account as well as to secure additional accounts or to create additional identities and to manage the identities across all these accounts. Okay, so that's from my side. Over to you, Abhishek. So few questions I have raised here, so we will discuss in the QA the questions which are raised here, and let me see if you have an understanding on this part, else I will provide you the answers. So over to you, Abhishek.
Thank you, Sonal, for your invaluable insights on technology. I'm sure it was certainly a very informative session for all of you. If you guys are interested in learning more about various identity management, do check out our super discounted batches of virtual instructor-led trainings on our website, springpeople.com. These VILT trainings are leveraged online from the comforts of your home and flexible as per your schedule and location. If you do not find any suitable batches, we would be happy to discuss and schedule private batches for you. If you don't have time to join live online, then do try our affordable self-paced courses. For more information, do write to us at training@springpeople.com or call on our number displayed on the current slide. Now we will open the forum to answer questions that we have received during the session. So let's get our questions answered. Over to you, Sonal.
Thank you, Abhishek. So guys, few questions I have raised. So let us discuss on those questions. So I would say it is end of the webinar, but it is just a beginning. There are many more aspects to identity access management, and there are many more features provided by AWS for IAM service, which is usually discussed in a detailed course. Okay, so multiple questions which are raised, that is, how do we protect or safeguard our root account? Anybody would like to answer this? Please, you can put in the chat. Yeah. Yeah, does anybody has answer to this question? How to protect the root account? Okay, let me answer this question. Now, to protect the root account, the first thing is that provide a secure password. So as I have already highlighted to all of you, how do we protect our protect the account? Or if I go back to my management console here and under account settings, you have the password policies been provided, right? So likewise, you have this policy. If you do a pull down and go to security credentials, you can do the same activity for your root account. So provide a secure password. That is one thing. Second important thing is multi-factor authentication. Protect your root account or any important account by adding one more layer of security, that is MFA. So once you configure MFA, every time you try to log on by root account, you have to provide your login ID, you have to provide your password, and then MFA code. Once things get authenticated, you are logged on. So this is how you protect your root account. I removed the MFA format from my root account just to showcase for this webinar that, can you see guys, security recommendations provided by AWS on my screen. Add MFA for root account. So it's giving me warning over here that MFA has to be configured for my root account. Now my second question, how many policies we can attach to a user? Is there a limitation to attach the number of policies? You can also raise question, guys. As I'm raising from my end, but suppose if you have any question on what points we discussed or any other question, please raise it over here. Yeah, how many policies can we attach? 1, 2, okay, no limitation. I'm just scrolling down here to see the response. As I can see, the response from someone has no limitation. Correct. So there is no limit for the number of policies can be attached to a user. We can attach multiple policy to user, multiple policy to group, as well as to role. Fine. Now the next question was the policy conflict. Can you tell me for this example, if a user has both allow and deny policy, which one takes the precedence? Yeah, which one takes the precedence? Always deny will take preference. Perfect. Yes, Ganesh, you are right. This window is so small, the QA window. I'm so sorry. Always, Ganesh is correct. Always deny takes the preference. Okay. So if it is contradicting, deny takes the preference. If it is like different services permission, one service is denied, the other is allowed, fine. Whatever is denied, deny always takes the precedence. How do we provide cross-account resource access, guys? What is important? What is the entity that we use in IAM service for providing cross-account resource access? Yes, perfect, Ganesh. Very good. So by using roles, correct. So basically, roles are for giving access to external users, giving access to federated users, providing access like creating an inter-service communication. So roles are for these are the multiple use cases for role: federated user, cross-account resource sharing, as well as for giving access. One service can access the other service by using a role. Perfect. So any other question, guys? Anybody has any question? Please post your questions here. I'll just pause for you to give an opportunity to raise a question in case if you have. We have 3 more minutes to utilize here. Okay. Now let me raise another question. What if I want to restrict a user to a particular region? Now, one thing I would want to highlight here is that IAM is a global service. You can see here, the moment I come to IAM, it changed my region to global. So it's a global service and we have a global access. The users has a global access, can deploy resources in all the regions. What if I want to restrict a user? Let's say this S3 admin user should be able to deploy resources only in one region. How do we do that? Think over this question. By the time I will answer Ganesh question, inline policy is only for single user or a single resource? Basically, inline policy we create for a single entity. Could be a resource, could be a principal, like could be a user, could be a group. So it is just for one resource. It is just like a resource-based policy. On a bucket, I define certain policy. It will be only for that bucket. I cannot use that policy for some other bucket. Okay. So that policy, the resource-based policy is going to be an inline for a bucket, for a particular resource. Similarly, when I create an inline policy for a user, it is going to get attached to that user, and I cannot use that policy to attach to any other entity or any other principal. Okay, so it is for a single entity. Could be for a single user, only for not just single. We should not call it a single user. It is only for a single for that entity for on which we define the inline policy. Okay. Yeah. So what's the answer to my question? If I want to provide access to only one region, a user default has access to all the region, can deploy resources in all the region, but how do I restrict a user to provide access to only one region? Should be able to deploy in a single region. So what is that we need to create? Yeah, what is that we need to create? Can I do this by using AWS managed policy, guys? I will have to create a custom policy. First thing, I will have to create a custom policy. Second thing, I will have to put a condition in my custom policy wherein I can define the region, which region I want to provide access as a condition to my policy. If the condition is satisfied, policy will be applicable. Means if the user is in a particular region, the user is allowed to deploy resources, as the user will not be allowed. So we have a condition. Quickly, I'll just take you over there and then we will wrap up the webinar. So if I go ahead and try to create a policy over here. Let's say I choose the service EC2, which is a regional service. And then I'm just selecting all actions. I just go ahead with all resource. And now as I go down further under request condition, I go to add another condition, and here I have got the service specific service level condition key. Under this, I have a condition key by the name region. So I can use this condition key to restrict user for a particular region. Okay, so this is how it works. Fine, so I hope you enjoyed the webinar. Due to time constraint, we just have to thought of completing only a few topics. So thank you so much, guys. Thanks for joining me today, and appreciate your time. And please provide your valuable feedback. Thanks once again.
Thank you, everyone. We appreciate you being here. We shall be sending out the webinar recording to all of you participants soon. I request you to kindly provide feedback before signing off, which will help us improve the quality of our future events. Thanks again for joining us today. Signing off on behalf of Team Spring People. Hope to see you again for our next expert webinar. Thank you and bye.